Let me welcome you to this panel conversation that will focus on our connectional ministries, restructuring proposals. I'm Arthur McClanahan, and I have the privilege of serving as the moderator for this conversation this afternoon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Iowa Annual Conference and chairperson of the United Methodist Association of Communicators, a group of really dedicated religious communication professionals who met here in Portland in the days just before the beginning of this, our pre-General Conference briefing. When the General Conference convenes on May 10th here in Portland, it will consider several proposals affecting the ministries of the church, and particularly the general agencies and the Connectional Table. The way the church organizes itself for ministry is an absolutely crucial reflection of our commitment to the vision and mission of our denomination. We've been reminded several times from people who have preceded us here on the platform that the mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And that as Reverend Amy Valdez Barker told us yesterday, it's likewise important to remember that the mission of the church, as we believe it, is that it is in the local church that the venue for this work of making disciples is most crucial. You remember that a considerable portion of the discussion at the 2012 General Conference focused on the structure of the church, and that several proposals changed during the course of the conversations during our time together in Tampa. In fact, Rick Peck's wrap-up story for the United Methodist News Service said that church restructuring received more attention from delegates than any other issue. This afternoon, we have three panelists who are going to help us better understand key points that will be made during this 2016 General Conference. Frederick Brewington is a governing member of the Connectional Table and a member of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. Fred will be sharing the Connectional Table's vision. Erin Hawkins is the General Secretary of the General Commission on Religion and Race. She will be bringing a general agency perspective to our conversation. And Reverend Dr. Clayton Oliphint, pastor of First United Methodist Church of Richardson, and a delegate from the North Texas Annual Conference, is representing Plan UMC Revised. For 5 to 7 minutes, we'll invite each of the three of you to tell us about the proposal or the position that you represent, and the actions that you hope that the 2016 General Conference will take regarding church restructuring. And after then some follow-up conversation among our panelists, we'll have some time for questions from you, our delegates, and communicators. So first, Fred.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to stand before you this afternoon. And before I go into the in-depth discussion that we need to have concerning restructuring, I'm going to ask everyone that has an ink pen available to them to pick it up and hold the pen. If you have a pen, would you just pick it up and hold it? Now, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to pull back so maybe we can get a shot of my hands. I'd like you to take the pen and place it between your thumbs so that it is facing the palms of your hands and your palms are facing out. Everybody got that? Okay, then what I'd like you to do is, and can you see my hands up on the screen? I'd like you to take the pen and turn it around so your hands are praying with the pin. Oh yeah, no, you can't cheat like that. Don't do that. No. I'm going to do it again, and just tell me if you're getting my hands on the screen. Okay, perhaps I'll stand in the middle. You're not going to pick it up but I'd like you to do this, and I simply like you to just turn your hand so the pen comes up between your thumbs. And if you got it, raise your hand. Okay, so I have 6 people that got it. Put your pens down. Keep that fact that 6 people got it the first time through, and the second time through, only 6 people got it. I've been blessed this past quadrennium to serve on our Connectional Table and our Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, and it's from that source of experience that I speak to you today. Our work together on the Connectional Table has included a focus upon CT's role and responsibility to communicate and enable communication across the connection on matters relating to our mission and our vision and values as the people called United Methodist. We'll pick the pen up later. Put them down. I'm watching. And just so you know, I want to know it's in the United Methodist tradition because there is a method to that. Through every season since our gathering in General Conference in Tampa, we all have had the opportunity to reflect on that experience, yes? At that gathering, many experience fear and joy and disappointment, jubilance, despair, and hope. The Connectional Table acknowledges that as we live into the worldwide nature of our denomination, we have many views of who we are and who we are to be in God's eyes and how we collectively get there. Currently, there are multiple formal and some informal proposals that address different aspects of our future structure, our future organization, our future relationships, our future connection. And as we deal with these processes and look at these options, we ask our questions: which ones do we need to follow? We are a spirit-filled people, the United Methodists, inspired to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. The Connectional Table neither adopts nor endorses any of the proposals that currently exist. And I want to be clear that that is the position that the table has taken at this time. However, as a part of its mandate, the CT recommends the following principles to be of some assistance to the church as it discusses and approaches and engages to make decisions on matters relating to our future structure, our organization, our relationships, and I'll use the word again, our connection. The Connectional Table believes that this is an exciting and challenging but crucial time for us as we stand on the precipice of what we must live into as we go forward in our worldwide nature. So let me just go through some bullet points that we have, and there are 9 that we'll place up on the screen. First, do no harm. Do all the good we can and stay in love with God. Sound familiar? Second, that we not act in haste and allow God to order our steps. Third, welcome the movement of the Holy Spirit and be open to new revelations. That's not an easy one. The next one, engage in meaningful discernment with active listening. Engage, active listening. The next, respect our differences and embrace our unity in Christ. The next, be intentional and be intentionally inclusive of all God's people. Not some, all. be mindful of the impact processes have on God's people, that we are dealing with proposals and processes, but behind every one of them, there are lives that are touched and changed and impacted. Be willing to reposition the prism through which we view the world. That became no more evident than it could have been for the entire Connectional Table when we met and had the Spirit swoop into the room in Mobutu. Engage in radical openness to foster genuine dialogue and cooperation. With these principles before us, the Connectional Table offers counsel about being methodical, inclusive, and patient in faithfully following the lead of the Holy Spirit on our journey about part of the body of Jesus Christ. The work of the Connectional Table this current quadrennium has heightened our understanding about how our church is configured in the many places around the world where we are in ministry with each other, where we are in ministry with sisters and brothers that don't look like us, where we are in ministry where languages are and can be a barrier, but don't necessarily need to be if we plan it right. Some examples: the worldwide nature of our denomination and the implications which arise from it. The informed work of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters and the Herculean task of what constitutes a global book of discipline. And why is that important? Working on the processes to fully and carefully address questions regarding our jurisdictional structure in the United States within a global context. Not in an isolation, not in a silo, but in context of what we need to do in concert with our brothers and sisters around the world. Collaboration with the General Board of Church and Society on the review and reshaping of the social principles, and I will tell you, there are other denominations that when it comes down to answering questions about what we should do socially in the world, do you know where they go? They go to the social principles of the United Methodist Church. And they look there to see, what are the Methodists saying? As United Methodists, we stand together to live into the call of God's church in 2016 and into the future. Our focus on the missional commitment of the church to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world is not only aspirational in its vision, it is what we must live into. Bishop Strife spoke to us about the work of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, and he talked to us about the work that was done and was being done on the Book of Discipline. The Book of Discipline is a book with rules. It is not the people. But if we are to be of one mind, the work that is yet to be done in the Book of Discipline, making it something that we have, that we can work with as a global community, is extremely important. As a church, we need to respond to this reality that we have a responsibility to live into what we said we wanted to do. We have an explosion of membership happening. And when people look at me and say, we're a dying denomination, I look at them and said, you need to go to Congo and speak to folks there. You need to be in Mozambique and see the excitement about what's happening there. You need to be in other places, because if we planted the seeds and did not prepare ourselves for the harvest, That is our concern. But as we now look at what has taken place in our worldwide church, we have a responsibility to live into that worldwide responsibility. And plans that need to be put in place need to be done in a way that is thoughtful, that is inclusive, and that is timely. Rushing into it will require us to, unfortunately, in my view, require us to go back. The Connectional Table, the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, the General Board of Church and Society, and other organizations, and we're going to hear from GCOR as well. But one of the concerns that I have is that we have to realize that we are not alone on the continent of North America. In this church, we have brothers and sisters that call themselves and put on the garb of the flaming cross of United Methodism in places that none of us could even imagine. They travel to their annual conferences that requires them days to travel by all sorts of methods, just simply to be in communication and in community with each other. If we are to be true to the seeds that we did plant, our responsibility to make sure that we do it and do it right the first time through is very important. So it's with that, in my some 37 seconds that I have left, that I say this to you as we enter into this conversation. Do not be deluded by the fact that we didn't get it right in Tampa. Because one of the things that one of my friends from Baltimore, Washington, Baltimore district said on the floor of General Conference after we tried to amend and amend and amend was, "Aren't you people listening?" The wind of the Spirit, of the Holy Spirit, just swept through this place and said, "You didn't do it right. Go back and start again." And that's what the Connectional Table and the Standing Committee on Central Conferences took to heart. We started our work. There is still yet work to be done. And as we come forward into General Conference in 2016 and look forward to 2020, when we think that the plans will be matured enough that we are encompassing every aspect and having conversation with all the people that we need to speak to and making sure that we have input on all the language levels that need to come in to talk. I suggest that on this one, time is on our side. God bless you.
Good afternoon. I want to start by sharing with you an experience that I had recently, about a week ago or so. You know, so many planes, so many days, time just kind of eludes me. But within the last week, 2 weeks, the General Commission on Religion and Race led a tribalism roundtable in Goma in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we were working in partnership as we led that roundtable with the General Board of Global Ministries and Just Peace, and welcome to Goma representatives from at least 5 to 6 Episcopal areas across the continent of Africa to share with us the realities of tribalism and the impact that it was having on the church in that place. And one of the things that I noticed as we we were engaging in our travels is that the team of us that came from the general agencies were staying in a different hotel than the rest of the participants. And after inquiring a few times and not getting a response, we finally learned that the reason that we were staying in the hotel that we were placed in was because that particular hotel was mere feet away from the Rwandan border. And if there was any sort of armed conflict or outbreak that took place during the time that we were there, we could physically run to safety across the Rwandan border. The reality of life in the Congo is such that the urgency of the moment, the realities that the people are living with, are causing us to think about how do we align ourselves differently so that if we need to get to safety, we can. And while I'm certainly grateful that those extra measures were taken for us to be in a safe place, I could not help but think about all of the rest of the participants and the people in that place who were across town who, if something happened, would not have the privilege, the luxury to run across the border to safety. The hundreds of thousands of women and children who are raped and maimed and killed every year on the continent of Africa as tools of war. The growth and the explosion of growth that we celebrate in the church in Africa is undermined by the very real realities of war and rumors of war that could erupt at any moment. And so as I lay in my comfortable space, knowing that just a short way away, there is an exit strategy if there's needed, what is the church doing for those who do not have a convenient exit strategy in their lives? This is an issue of mission and identity for the United Methodist Church as we discern our future. At the end of 2015, the United Methodist News Service did a poll where they polled the various conference communicators to see what were the top stories of 2015. The top of the list was racism, followed by the Syrian conflict, with the European migrant crisis, the church's debate over human sexuality, Ebola, the rise of licensed local pastors in the church. All of these point to the cultural contexts in which we are called to do ministry now and into the future. Every one of those stories speaks to the mission and the very identity of who we say we are as the United Methodist Church. Over 5 years ago, I served as a member of the call to action team that penned the document that gave rise to our current urgency around looking at the restructure of the general church. You will recall that in that document that those of us who are a part of crafting and who signed our names to it said that the creeping crisis, the crisis of the church, is not merely financial, although we have some concerns in that area. It's not merely numbers, although there are certainly concerns in that area, but our creeping crisis is a relational one. The one in which we are in community with one another and with the world in which we're called to be in ministry with. It's a crisis of irrelevance. This is what the work of the agency, and although the agencies deal certainly with organizational challenges, just like any other entity does, what we are grappling with at the agency level, at the general church level, what Fred spoke to for the Connectional Table, are these questions of identity and mission, and how we are called to show up in the world as a relevant and credible witness to the transforming love and grace of Jesus Christ. This is at the core of the work that we are currently doing as we think together with how do we show up as the Church of Jesus Christ moving into the future. Dr. Lovett Weems, in his book, Focus, says, as time goes by, and especially when difficulties arise, an organization with a loss of shared identity and mission turns its blame inward. It aims at a host of perceived foes, and we forget that our real pull is one of identity, mission, context, and relationship. And so it would go to say that as we think about the restructuring conversations that are taking place all across the church, that it might be wise for us to take heed of that old adage that form follows function. UMCOM has done extensive research and has shared with us that there is still a lack of clarity around the mission of the church, how that mission is interpreted, and how it is lived out in annual conferences in local churches. We still have a long way to go to bring greater alignment to our identity, as has been discussed over the day and a half that we've already been here. That there is a need for greater clarity and alignment around identity and mission. And with that clarity, the hope is that our structures, the way in which we organize our life together, would be congruent with that greater sense of clarity. So I don't think that there's any question, at least in the agency's mind, about whether or not restructuring, rethinking, realigning is necessary. It's not only necessary, it's inevitable. It's a new frontier out there. The global mission field is not what it once was. It was not the mission field that the church structures that we currently have were set up to encounter. And so that rethinking, that realigning is important. We cannot sidestep it. We cannot avoid it. We need to engage in the work of rethinking and realigning our work and our structures in a thoughtful and constructive way. But it must be shaped by identity, mission, values, and it must be context appropriate. It must place us in a place where we as a church can look at the world and say, for those people that are suffering all around the world, the church can show up. For the woman at the African Round Table that says, you know, we really need resources to teach lay and clergy leaders in Africa how to deal across these lines of tribe and ethnicity, because my children will die in an armed conflict if we don't. Where is the church? When our cities are burning, where is the church? When we're engaged in all of this life-sucking tension, where is the church? We've got to be thinking about identity, mission, and values. So there are a couple of questions that as we proceed that I believe that we are struggling with as the general agencies and that the General Conference must struggle with as well. As we look at restructuring proposals, what specifically are the benefits of the proposals that are coming before the General Conference, and how do those benefits strengthen the mission to the degree that they outweigh the financial, the relational, and the organizational costs that they will all incur? GCFA has begun to do cost-benefit analysis of that and is already beginning to raise questions about whether some of the proposals will actually save money, resources, time, and talent of the church. Added bureaucracy adds financial and relational costs, and it decreases the responsiveness, the nimbleness, and the innovation that can come from approaching ministry in a way that's relevant to our local communities. The second question, how do these proposals align with or negate the values and practical aspects of the realignment work that is already taking place? Like the work that the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters is doing, the enabling legislation that's being brought forth that will give us a comprehensive worldwide approach to reorganization. And thirdly, what is lost? And how will provisions be made to ensure that in any restructuring proposal, the things that have been lost do not have the unintended consequence of accelerating the level of mistrust and the rate of disconnection, irrelevance, and decline? For the commissions of the church, this is a very important question, because most of the plans that seek to merge or sublimate the work of the commissions also gut the pieces of our work that are most aligned with the mission, that are most aligned with the 4 areas of focus, and that are most aligned with our ability to provide practical resources to that young mother who does not want her child to die in an armed conflict. To the pastor that says, the Black Lives Matter movement is on my corner and I want our church to be in conversation with them, but I'm afraid and I don't know how, can you help me? For the church that's saying, we're hearing all the vitriolic language that's being spewed about migrant people all across the world, how do I help to understand how to bring a discipleship response to this? These are the things, these are the questions that we must struggle with together.
Hi. I'm Clayton Oliphint. I'm pastor of First United Methodist Church, Richardson, Texas, a member of the North Texas Conference, and a proud member of the steering committee of the Office of Christian Unity and Interreligious Relationships. And I appreciate the issues raised by Fred and Erin and their excellent presentations. I want to quickly go through Plan UMC Revised, which is before the General Conference. And is this my clicker? Okay. Plan UMC Revised, as you remember, or Plan UMC, was adopted by General Conference in 2012 by a 60% margin. How do I advance the? They're advancing. Okay. Okay. The earlier version was passed by General Conference in 2012 with a 60% margin, and it was a General Conference plan. I want to be very clear about that. This revision was only to address constitutional issues. It did not change the plan other than the constitutional issues that were raised by the Judicial Council. It did not address any other changes. So it was the plan that was adopted by General Conference by that 60% margin. Right now, that is before the Judicial Council, and we hope that they will rule on that prior to General Conference. I'm not here to debate the constitutionality of Plan UMC Revised, but we do believe that the constitutional issues that were raised by the Judicial Council have been addressed. Remember that that Plan UMC and Plan UMC Revised were a perfecting of the document that came out of, press right there. Oh, that's so good. Green always means go, right? So it came out, it was a perfecting of the document that came out of the call to action, and there was a group called Plan B also that brought a plan. And so those plans were perfected and brought to General Conference. I want to bring attention to what the call to action plan brought up, because I think this is very important for the church, that the whole purpose of this was to redirect the flow of attention, energy, and resources to an intense concentration on fostering and sustaining an increase in the number of vital congregations effective in making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That is a critical part of our understanding of what Plan UMC Revised is about. Plan UMC Revised, in overview, it reduces the size and number of the general agencies, and I would direct your attention, especially those of you who are new to General Conference, to the Towers-Watson report and the Apex report that were released prior to the last General Conference, because all of those reports talked about our agency structure and how we are structured in silos and the need to reduce and consolidate our general agencies was lifted up as an issue in all of those reports. It also restores fair representation, and it strengthens the role of the Connectional Table as a coordinating body. Plan UMC Revised, some of the specifics, it will have a Connectional Table that will be led by an Executive General Secretary who works with the Council of Bishops to coordinate the work of the agencies, with the focus, again, being on vital congregations making disciples. The General Secretaries would report to the Executive General Secretary administratively in regard to alignment and focus, and they would report programmatically to their boards. They would be nominated by their boards and elected by the Connectional Table. Some of the plans, and this has been referenced already, but it would merge the General Commission on Religion and Race and the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women into a committee on inclusiveness that would be at the heart of the work of the Connectional Table. This was actually a plan that was not brought up by me or anyone else associated with Plan UMC Revised. This came out of the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women in 2004, was recommended and to the General Conference in Pittsburgh, and was brought forward into Plan UMC Revised. It merges the General Commission on Archives and History into the General Commission on Finance and Administration as a committee, continuing that important work. And again, I said merge faith and order into the Council of Bishops. It actually restores faith and order as a body of the Council of Bishops. In haste, at the last minute General Conference, when all those things were flying, faith and order kind of went away. But we'd like to bring it back as a group of the Council of Bishops. It maintains the Office of Christian Unity and Interreligious Relationships in the council as an office of the Council of Bishops. Again, some of the specifics of the plan: it reduces the number of directors of boards and agencies from 435 to 328. It's about a 25% reduction in the number of directors. It assures fair representation. If we talk about justice issues in the church, currently there are 21 persons from Africa who serve on our general boards and agencies. That's less than 5%. And I think if you look at fair representation by any measure, that would be woefully short. It places inclusivity at the center of the Connectional Table work. Not one voice competing among many voices, but a committee that is at the Connectional Table that becomes the work of the whole and the monitoring and the encouragement of the whole. Several years ago, I was in a church and we had a committee on evangelism, and I talked about everyone doing the work of evangelism, and someone said, well, that's what that committee does. That committee of 5 people that signed up for evangelism, that's what they do. Well, it turns out they weren't doing it either. So it becomes the work of the whole. So I think it's very important. This is a very important work: religion and race, the status and role of women, and all inclusivity issues in terms of all groups of marginalized people, that it be at the heart of our work on the Connectional Table and be part of the whole and not separated out as a separate agency. Restructure does not create renewal. And I've never been one that thought that restructure is the panacea that will fix our church, but it is a critical step in renewing our church. And I just leave you with this, that doing things the way we have been doing will continue to produce the same results. We are at a place where we could wait 4 years and study this some more. We passed this by a 60% margin 4 years ago, and we've been waiting. And I think it's time to do something different than the way we've always done things. I think, this is a great conversation to have about how do we structure our church to make vital congregations that will make disciples for the transformation of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for the presentations that you've made and for the perspectives that you've brought to this important conversation. I get the sense from all of you that there is a belief that revising the structure of the United Methodist Church is important in one way or another. I have a couple of questions that you might want to bat around among yourselves as you have the opportunity to sit here together with our delegates and our communicators. One of the first questions I want to ask is, how have the perspectives that you each have represented been vetted with the constituents across the church worldwide? How do you know that your plan will answer the kinds of questions and respond to the kinds of needs that folks are expressing across the denomination? Go ahead.
Well,
Yeah, you're on.
one of the things that's extremely important is the process by which the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters and the Connectional Table has found itself engaged in. That has been one of making sure that we are reaching out and including as many voices as we can find that exist in the church. The importance of that work is that the resources that the General Conference has provided to the Connectional Table to do that work, that those resources are being utilized to seek out the information that is necessary to try and help make the decisions that are not guesswork, but that are based on concrete understanding about what is necessary and what is actually taking place worldwide. That is extremely important for us as we go forward, not to simply create structures, but to understand that we are necessarily building something for the future.
There are two things that I would say about that. One is the plan that the Commission on Religion and Race is bringing, which it also brought to the last General Conference and was passed out of committee and through the consent calendar before the Plan UMC situation kind of derailed that. And that was a plan to align our work with the needs that are happening in annual conferences and in local churches. And so we've rewritten and have been operating, and in the Book of Discipline, annual conference commissions on religion and race have been operating with a new sense of purpose about their work that is centered around developing culturally competent leaders, holding vital conversations, and developing equity in the church. And the reason that we came to this plan of restructuring, rethinking our life together is specifically in response to what we've been hearing in the local, at the local levels about the value that this ministry has for the church. And so, you know, for example, many align the work of both GCOR and COSRO as being primarily monitoring agencies, but there is a significant limitation to that. And in fact, that's only a small part of what we do as an agency. Talk to the seminaries where we're training new incoming clergy to be effective across lines of difference, and talk to local churches that are thinking about coming into better relationship with their local communities. Talk with the Commission on the Status and Role of Women about the retrenchment that we're actually seeing in women's leadership all across the church. The monitoring function, while important, and COSRO has done a wonderful job in terms of keeping us abreast of that, is not the hope of the church moving into the future. And so if the plan that guts all of the actual equipping work that's happening in local churches in favor of a passive role of monitoring and reporting in a non-programmatic body is the way that we think about the future, then I don't think that that is responsive to what people in churches on the ground all over the world are asking for.
I think there was great frustration coming out of Tampa with the Judicial Council decision and the fact that we wasted a lot of time and went through a lot of angst to actually work and pass a plan that then was taken down on a judicial technicality. So, and as I've talked to people from central conferences, one of the things that I hear from them is that so much of the work that they come, you know, to hear about at General Conference is U.S.-based. And how would it not be U.S.-based if 21 of the directors are from Africa? How would it not be U.S.-based if it's primarily U.S.-based? And I think that's something we really need to pay attention to in our whatever goes forward at General Conference, is listening to those voices and empowering those voices to be a part of the process. And that takes us back to not being so U.S. focused on all of our issues. In terms of the merging of GC, religion and race with status and role of women, I will say that the budget and the not only the monitoring functions, but the programmatic functions are left intact in Plan UMC Revised.
Let's review that in our reading of the legislation.
All right. Well, you want to press that for a minute?
It's not.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about it.
Okay.
The programmatic work of the agency is not being moved to a non-programmatic body called the Connectional Table, whose job is to align mission and ministry. It is not to do program. It is not to provide resources to the local church. And the legislation does not say that our role is to provide training, resourcing, funding to local churches for the purpose of helping them to be vital in a changing mission field. That is not the purpose of the Connectional Table, and it is not the purpose of the Connectional Table as it is reflected in the legislation of Plan UMC.
Okay. Fred?
The other thing the other thing that goes along with that, in my view, is that the Connectional Table is the one that should be bringing all the resources to the table so that they can work collectively together. The Connectional Table has not been and is not programmatic in and of itself. I mean, working on it up until this time. And it's interesting that at this particular point, the reference to trying to expand the Connectional Table and putting an executive officer over it seems to be more of a business plan than it does to be a missional plan.
So,
I think that's fair, Fred, and I will just say that what we currently have is a business plan. We currently have a business plan that came out of the 1960s, and it may have worked in its time, but it doesn't seem to be working now. So maybe a new plan that's developed and learning from best practices from business, but always keeping in mind that we are the church, always keeping in mind that we're the church.
timing is one of the issues that you all have identified, and timing is one of the issues that we're seeing large in the screen in front of us. So I want to ask one question for a quick response, a little popcorn answer, and then we're going to turn to folks at the microphones, and we're going to alternate. So right side to my right, left side, right side, and remember that you've got 1 minute, and that's an opportunity for you to say what you want to say, ask your question, and then we'll need to proceed on to the next question. So real quick, is there any common ground?
I think the common ground is there. We do need to do things differently. We need to be thinking about how we can be a more effective church, to be a more relevant church, and to think about it. I think what you just said, Clayton, about doing it as the church from a relational model and not simply using a business model, but certainly being influenced by the best practices of organization around the world is something that I think we can all agree on. How we do that in a way that keeps the unity, the relationships, and the ability for us to be the church that we aspire to be is probably where some of the rub happens.
I think that there is some commonality, and I think we do need to continue to talk about it. The issue of preparing ourselves as we go forward from where we are now into the future requires us to be thoughtful about it. And simply wanting to put a plan in so that there's a plan there without putting the foundation that needs to be created is extremely a major concern. There is an important aspect of foundational work that needs to be done, and that is not done overnight, particularly when we want something that's long-lasting.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Now,
Yes.
House left, stage right, for your first question, and if you'd let us know your name and then to whom you want to speak.
Kenitha Bigum-Sai, West Michigan Annual Conference and Connectional Table, and I'd like to address this question to both Fred and to Erin. And also to add a point of clarification, the Connectional Table has been working very closely with the Standing Committee on Central Conferences, and we are intentionally not offering any restructure proposals because our intent is to allow the work of the Standing Committee, the General Board of Church and Society, et cetera, to reach its place of fruition before before we bring such things, and so we're not proposing anything structural in 2016. So I would like to ask Fred and Erin what you see as a way forward and the most useful way for people in the connection to engage these conversations, and is the most useful way to engage these conversations actual restructuring legislation?
I think the most useful way of addressing this at this point is to understand that there is work that is still taking place. The work has to be, in my view, allowed to go forward, but especially the work that needs to be done in each of the subgroups within the United Methodist Church, particularly the jurisdictions where the Connectional Table is asking each of the jurisdictions to formulate information that will provide us with a better understanding to help us deal with some of the structural issues that are here in the United States that will then be made part of our discussion about what it looks like in the worldwide nature. That's part of what we're doing.
You want to weigh in?
Sure. I think eventually, yes, structural legislation will be necessary. I think the way forward now is to continue to work toward greater clarity around the identity, the mission, the values, and the contextual issues that confront us as a denomination. And until we can find our way forward on questions of identity, then I think the structural proposals will continue to bring the same sorts of challenges that they're currently confronting us with.
Hi, I'm Dawn Wiggins-Hare. I'm the General Secretary of the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women and a delegate from Alabama, West Florida, and I have been for a couple of quadrennia. And I just wanted a couple of points of clarification. One, Reverend Oliphint, I look forward to meeting you, but we've never met. And to make it clear, the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women has not been a part of any meetings with the proponents of Plan UMC Revised, and I believe there was some confusion in your remarks. It sounded like we were at the table also. And also a point of clarification, and I've only been in this position since January of 2013, but it is my understanding that several quadrennia ago, when there were discussions and legislation that was proposed and then withdrawn, it was because they saw the church saw the need for a council, not a committee, on inclusiveness that would have basically the same seat at the table as GCFA, and with accountability for the entire church, not to be a committee or a subcommittee of some particular group. So I just wanted to share that with the group.
Thank you. And I would say that the people who put forward Plan UMC Revised did nothing to address the way it came out of General Conference 2012. It only addressed the constitutional issues. That was the only parts of it we addressed. We didn't address any, so that's it. In my mind, it's still a General Conference plan that was put forward by General Conference by a 60% vote.
Yes, sir, I just was offering my comments as an invitation to talk and as a clarification.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm looking at the clock, and I get 3 words in front of me. One more question. So, sir, to my right, you have the one more question, I'm sorry to say.
What an honor. My name is Ole Birk. I am a member of the CT, and I am a representative in the CT for the Northern Europe and Eurasia Central Conference. And one of the things that gives us in the Central Conference is great hope for our church is the fact that we have a process where we are listening to each other, and where the members of the Methodist churches throughout the Central Conferences, through the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, are given the opportunity to influence what kind of church we should be for the future and have a say in that, and that we have a long process where we listen and create all the things that Fred has been telling us about. And I want to say that, ask our friend from Plan UMC, I think, have you no idea of creating something that is not just a fix of administrative problems, but a vision for a church globally?
I think the process was that the Connectional Table 4 years ago had all these studies done that showed where the church was and all the issues, and that we had to, if we want to further the mission of the church worldwide, we have to empower local churches. We have to be focused on creating vital local churches throughout the world. And if you want to talk about diffuse power, you know, I've heard it said that this creates too much power in the hands of too few. The greatest power in the world is the local church, alive with the power of God at work in ministry. And when you have 30,000 local churches that are you know, being resourced by the denomination, instead of just existing to pay apportionments, they are actually being resourced by the denomination to create vitality where they are. I think there's great hope for the church and great promise going forward for a worldwide, global church that is making a profound difference in the world.
Well, I have two good friends on my side who recognize the fact that there were about 9 people in front of the microphones without an opportunity to speak, so we've been given 10 more minutes. Now, with the caveat that make your question short, sweet, and to the point, and without a preface. So make your question and speak directly, and let's have our answers be as concise as is humanly possible. So go ahead.
Hello, Jeremy Smith, clergy, Oregon, Idaho Annual Conference. My question is for Dr. Oliphint. When you said that inclusivity is at the heart of the Connectional Table work, but the concern for many is over 2 administrative abilities that have been added to what is understood as a visioning body. The first is the ability to fire a general secretary or to disallow their nomination of one of the agencies, and also the ability to edit budgets in some way in consultation with the GCF&A. And so my question is, why is having centralized executive control so integral to this proposal in ways that that sort of ability that does not currently reside there, but instead resides with the local boards, with the agency boards that are closer to the mission and ministry of that board? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the primary reason is alignment of resources. We are alignment and accountability. I think we have an opportunity with this plan. I don't know of another nonprofit agency. I work with a number of nonprofit agencies. I don't know of another nonprofit agency that doesn't have a CEO that is trying to marshal the resources of that agency, not control, but to marshal the resources of that agency to impact its mission field. And I think that's the desire of this plan, is that how can we bring alignment of our general agencies in focus so that the focus becomes on creating vital congregations, making disciples of Jesus Christ.
All right. To my right, again, your question, no preamble, just let us have it.
Joe Harris, Oklahoma Conference. This is a question for Dr. Oliphint and for Erin. The question for Dr. Oliphint will be on the question about collaboration. I realize this was a plan from a previous general conference, but my question was about collaboration even then, particularly with the agencies and with the central conferences. I hear a lot of speaking for these people, but I'm not sure how much work there has been to gather that. So that's my question, Dr. Oliphint. To Erin, the question is, has the agencies been listening to what happened at the last general conference, or just waiting for something to happen at this general conference?
You mean the agencies in general, Joe?
Yes.
Yes, we've had several conversations around the General Secretary's table about how do we move toward greater alignment, how do we lift up the stories where new collaboration is happening, knowing that certainly we're not all the way there yet, but certainly making some great strides. I think the work of the General Board of Global Ministries in terms of their creation of regional offices is a great example of how we're seeking choosing to be more global in our work and thinking about constructing ministry in new and innovative ways. The same can be said for the General Board of Church and Society with the global listening sessions that they've been holding around the social principles. And so I think there have been a number of efforts that would not have taken place this quadrennium had it not been for our consideration of things that had happened at the last General Conference and the realities that they've placed before us.
Thanks, Erin.
And Joe, I would say that that plan it came out of General Conference from the call to action plan, and with its focus on vital congregations, and then a merger from the Plan B group that was concerned about fair representation, and that's where it came before General Conference. I wasn't part of those deliberations, but and I know it got to the floor of the General Conference. It was a General Conference document, and it was debated and it was voted on.
The only thing I would say is that the approach which is being taken is holistic currently by the Connectional Table and will address in large part some of the concerns that you raised.
All right. I'm still cognizant of time, and I'm sorry to say we have but only time for one more question. So, gentleman to my left.
Tyler Amundsen, a delegate from Yellowstone Conference and also a member of the Division of Young People's Ministry. And Dr. Oliphint, this question is directly to you, actually. One of the concerns that the division saw within Plan UMC was a removal specifically of our delegation or our representation on the Connectional Table. So I just want to ask you, within the plan where you see young people being represented in the structure of what you're talking about, because that's a concern for us, is that young people's voices would be removed within Plan UMC.
I have to go back and look at the organizational chart on that, but certainly I think the voice of young people is very, very important to the church, and I think it's vital that we listen and have young people represented in all of our agencies and on all of our boards.
All right. Let me say first a word of thanks, Fred, Erin, and Clayton. I want to express thanks for your focused attention and also for your appreciative respect in the course of a conversation that has lots of sides and edges and perspectives and a lot of energy. And thank all of you for your time and your direct attention.